Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Scott Courtier, and you're at hopefully you're in the right place for the Introduction to InduSoft Web Studio, or what we call the Jumpstart webinar. Again, my name is Scott Courtier. Why the heck am I doing this for you guys? Well, I'm Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft, and I've got about 27 years of automation experience, and a good portion of that has been with InduSoft. I've done a lot of HMI and SCADA, but I've taught the training classes for InduSoft. I've gone on site and actually deployed the product, and I think I'm kind of qualified to help you out here. We actually started this program a couple of years ago, I think, and the idea was basically to give you an overview. You know what, I'm going to come back to the agenda here. The focus for this webinar is on new users. And if you've got hopefully some HMI and or PLC experience, and this is really going to be an accelerated learning curve or a jumpstart. And this webinar is not meant to show you everything. It's not a training. What it's meant to do and why we started it is first-time users for InduSoft Web Studio. Usually first-time users find InduSoft pretty easy to use, but what we thought we'd do is take that that period where you're kind of looking at the help system and trying to figure your way around, that might take you a few days to a week or so to do, and kind of reduce that down to a couple of hours. And having taught the training classes, I've seen some of the pitfalls and some things that people might get stuck on or wrinkle their eyebrows about, and so we're going to try to get you over that period and get you a great head start to get you going. Let us know how you find this. Give us feedback. We're going to give you a survey after this, and we'd also like to know your shirt size, and because we'll send you a free T-shirt just for joining us today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. A reminder for you, again, this is really for new users, but if you've got some experience, one of our attendees has put in that they've been working with InduSoft for a number of years, and I'll tell you this, that I had somebody in one of my classes say, literally stopped the training class midway through and say, I've been working with InduSoft for 8 years, and I've learned something in this class almost every single minute that I've been here. So hopefully there's something in it for you, but again, it's geared towards new users, and if you've attended a Jumpstart webinar before, the material is going to be pretty much the same. So if you don't want to hang around, then you don't have to, but again, maybe you'll learn something new. So again, that's who this is for. So I'm going to back up here. What is this going to entail? We're going to give a brief InduSoft overview. And the reason I do that is a lot of people might not realize you might have been handed this project, say, here, you have to do an InduSoft project, and you might not have been part of the selection process. So you might not really understand everything about InduSoft as a company and what we can do and where we're headed. Then I'll talk about the demo that's included with the product. If you didn't know, there's a pretty good demo that's included with it, and then I'll actually demonstrate how to use features within InduSoft Web Studio, and that's going to be the majority of this webinar. And then how to find additional resources, where to get training, where to get tech notes, where to get some help, things of that nature, and how to contact us. So let's see, just a quick, if I can have somebody just let me know, can you hear me okay and see the screens and whatnot? I don't want to get talking too far and get going too far. So if somebody could let me know, either in the chat panel, the Q&A window, if you can hear me okay. Anybody. I guess all is okay. Let me see if there we go. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So here we go. Again, let's see. I already did that slide. So let's talk about the company overview. InduSoft was established about 18 years ago in the United States. And just so everybody understands the story and what's going on here, we were acquired by Invensys in 2013, and then later by Schneider Electric in early 2014. And InduSoft has been kind of still doing what we've been doing and kind of kept independent. Although we've got new email addresses, things have been moving forward as planned, and we've got a lot of nice, neat features and plans coming out in the future. We just recently released version 8.0, which I'm going to be demonstrating here. Although if you have 7.1 or even an earlier version, there's not much, not a lot of user interface changes that you'll see, but it might be a good reason to upgrade to version 8.0. We were the first to have an HMI software product for Windows CE. If you're not familiar with Windows CE, it's an operating system by Microsoft. It's for embedded, typically a single-purpose type application is how I've seen it presented, where maybe, if I'm not mistaken, Windows CE, I think was a version of it was used in the first Microsoft Xbox, or you might find it like in cable set-top boxes, or something like a vending machine with a screen on it, something very specifically purposed. And a handful of industrial automation companies came out with industrial HMIs, panel PCs that were running Windows CE. It's a low footprint, typically needs low horsepower computing, and a good number of our applications are using Windows CE, still using Windows CE, and it helps us keep a small footprint and a very efficient product. We were the first to have a web-based solution, an XML integration. We have a patent for our database connectivity, and I'm going to demonstrate how to connect to a database and kind of show you where that, how easy that is to use. Multi-touch support, and again, HTML5 integration going forward. The vision of the company is really to talk to anything on any network, get any data, and that's using standards as well as security. And things like OPC or TCP/IP or ADO.NET connecting to databases. A lot of these standards come into play when maybe we don't have an exact feature or way to do things. Well, you can use some of these other communications technologies, display technologies, things of that nature, in a way to get information into or out of your InduSoft Web Studio project, and it just makes it be able to get really anything anywhere. What markets are we in? Well, as you can see here, we're in a lot of different markets, but really what I like to point out on this slide is the and others column here at the end, because we're really in just about every industry that you can imagine. Excuse me. Another reason why I like to point out this slide is the way we typically have the product set up is we've been doing this for a long time, and we haven't made a bunch of modules and things that you need to buy extra. There's very few things that are add-on products that you need to buy, and really nothing that you need to buy to make a complete solution. For example, I've seen competitors' products, customers get frustrated when it's like, oh, I forgot to buy the data module, or I forgot to buy the database module or the trend module, and then they have to figure out the pricing and go back to purchasing and purchase more. Well, we include everything in the product. That's been done based on customers like yourselves requesting features. For example, the pharmaceutical industry a number of years ago requested some features to help with traceability. There's a U.S. government Code of Federal Regulations put out, and it's called 21 CFR Part 11. And that's basically, do you have the features to make your product be traceable, like who made what changes, what ingredients, who was logged in and when, and make all those logged to a database. So we have that feature in the product, and we have it available whenever you install the product as well. So that's come up more and more in water and wastewater, food and beverage, some packaging applications, as Homeland Security gets involved. So things like that, when we get new features in the product, we typically add them and make them available to everybody. So that was a quick overview of the company. So what about the product? InduSoft Web Studio is really an easy-to-use HMI for industrial panels, embedded, mobile devices, and a lot of different applications. Could be building automation, could be machine building, operating machines, you name it. We've got applications in fast food restaurants and lots of different applications. So where do we run? Well, we run on any Microsoft operating system, both 32 and 64 bits, including CE, embedded Windows, such as Embedded XP, Embedded Standard 7. We run on desktop versions. Looks like I need to update this slide, because not only Vista XP, Vista, Windows 7, 8, 8.1, and now 10, Windows 10, and server editions as well. You know what? Before I get off on this slide, something relatively new in the 8.0 version is a new product that we call IoT View. An IoT View is really suggested not necessarily for end users, but maybe for a customer that builds a valve or a flow meter or a temperature controller to actually embed right in those devices and give you a small HMI and or data collection right from that device. So if you are interested in that or know of any manufacturers that might be able to use that, please contact us and let us know. And that IoT View product can actually run on Linux or VxWorks, and we're investigating other operating systems as well. So adding support for other operating systems, that's something that people have been asking us for a while, and we listen. So in general, how do you use, what do you do when you deploy an InduSoft Web Studio project? Well, typically you have a development system. Here I've shown a laptop, and maybe you'll have a cable. Maybe this will be Ethernet through a hub or a router or company network, or maybe it's a wireless connection or a radio modem or even a satellite connection. We've done that. Any place where you can get really a TCP/IP connection, or you can even transfer the project via USB stick or DVD or, heaven forbid, a floppy disk. But basically, you develop and configure your project on a development environment, and then you run it often on an industrial PC, but it doesn't have to be on an industrial PC. It could be a laptop, a desktop, a server. And that one runtime can usually communicate to often a PLC or a database. Could be multiple PLCs. Depending on your license level, you can communicate to multiple drivers simultaneously. And multiple drivers, I don't mean multiple PLCs because you can do that, but each driver might have many PLCs on that. So even though your license might support, let's say, 3 drivers, that's not 3 PLCs, that's 3 driver networks, each supporting however many that PLC protocol supports. So you could have 20, 30, 40, 50 PLCs and still only have a couple of drivers. Hopefully that makes sense. You could communicate to databases, and instead of, or in addition to, using our built-in drivers, you could also communicate OPC. So a lot of different ways that one runtime might be communicating with. And then you can disconnect the development system and the project will still continue to run. So just a quick note, the way we license the product is either with soft key or hard key. The hard keys can be various forms of USB or SD cards, micro SD cards, depending on the platform you choose. And you can split up hard key versus soft key on either the development or the runtime, and there's advantages to both of those. So hopefully that answers some of your questions right there. Some other architectures, and you know, we've seen this over the years, that maybe you're deploying an HMI on a machine or a process. Just a little bit from my background, I'm often going to say the word machine. Now, please take that, it's just from my background, please take, when I say machine, that could be your machine, your process, however you're using InduSoft Web Studio. So apologize because I often will say machine and just mean that generically. So you might take that runtime, and we'll call it a runtime server, and that's from a software standpoint. That's not from a server hardware standpoint. So our runtime might be running on a PC, and then you might add an Ethernet network, and then be able to deploy thin clients. Now we have 3 different types of thin clients. The first is Internet Explorer based, and we call that Web Thin Client. So picture this. Picture you've got an HMI running out on a plant floor on a machine producing parts or a process somewhere, and a production supervisor or maintenance staff wants to see what's going on. Well, they can open up Internet Explorer on their Office PC, point to the runtime server IP address, and view the graphics, the animations, and optionally interact with those screens, of course with security in mind, from their desktop PC. Now take a second type of thin client, and this is more what's shown in this picture, is maybe there's a large machine or a large process or a long machine, and maybe you want a duplicate of that HMI somewhere else on that machine. You might add another industrial PC on the other side of the machine, and install our Secure Viewer software, Secure Viewer Thin Client software, and be able to then point it back to the runtime server and view the graphics and interact with it again with security in mind. And it looks just like the real runtime. And again, that's using a small piece of software called Secure Viewer. And often in the training class, I have to teach people how to tell the difference between the real runtime and the Secure Viewer because it looks and acts the same. Unlike the Web Thin Client, which is Internet Explorer based, where you get the Internet Explorer browser window there, Secure Viewer, you don't get that. It's edge to edge and full screen, and it looks just like the real runtime application. The third type of client that we have is relatively new, just in the last few years, but it's really, I think, innovative because what you have, and now I'm going to show this as a wireless network, but it's another adaptation of network. It doesn't have to be wireless, but it can be. Is using tablets or remote computing or iPads or Android smartphones or tablets or iPhone. Lots of different ways that you can do this. So it could be a desktop running Chrome or Internet Explorer or Safari. But this allows your operators to be more efficient than they've ever been. Not so long ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it wouldn't be uncommon to have one operator per machine, maybe 10 machines, 10 operators. But now it's not so uncommon to find 10 machines and maybe 1 or 2 operators. So those operators have to be much more efficient than they've ever been. If they're over on machine number 8 and there's a problem going on machine number 2, if you give them a smartphone or a tablet and they can determine is it an emergency, is production down, and determine if they have to physically go there. And that might be, in some cases, a long way away. If you're got a large process or maybe a manufacturing line that's quite long. I've been on, say, for example, an engine assembly line at General Motors where it's maybe 800 feet long. Might be nice to know, do I have to go that far away to be able to get to the problem? So those are some of the architectures that we have within InduSoft Web Studio. Each of those 3 thin clients that I just mentioned, you get one of those with your runtime license, and you can go up to 128 of each of those simultaneously just by adding on the license. And that's one of the rare occasions where we have add-ons in the product. Now, InduSoft Web Studio is a very complete product. Now, I go through this screen really as a checklist for myself, but to show you really how complete it is. The product is based on tags, and so we have a tag database where you can define integers, Boolean, real, string, indirect addressing, arrays, pointers, lots of different ways to get at that. We also have this concept of a class, and for most of you, if I say the word structure or maybe even user-defined structure, it's that kind of concept where maybe I'll have a tank, and then I can define tank level, tank pressure, tank temperature, tank contents as a way to define that and kind of set that up as a structure. We can have the entire menuing, the development environment can be put into, I forget the exact number, 7 or 8 different languages. But that's in addition to the runtime can really be put into any language because we're based on Unicode fonts. Basically, you can create a lookup table, get that translated, and the entire project can be translated for you. So the product isn't itself a translator, but you can export that column, maybe copy and paste that into Google Translate, and then paste it back into the product and get at least a machine translation where it can then maybe be cleaned up by somebody else. But if you've got an application that's multinational or shipping overseas, that's a great way to do it. We also have remote tools to be able to connect to a remote device or remote HMI, be able to start, stop, download, troubleshoot that remotely. So that's a real handy tool rather than copying and pasting to a USB stick, moving it over to the other device, copying and pasting, etc. This allows you to connect to it, stay connected, and if you make changes, it can automatically update the remote device while it's connected, which is kind of nice. Web publishing, as I mentioned that, to be able to view on remote devices in several different formats for those different thin clients. Security system built in. In addition to the built-in security system that we have, you can also tie into a protocol called LDAP, which is the same that Microsoft Active Directory is based on. So you can tie into a plant's your own corporate security system and not have to manage that yourself. We have these things called task worksheets that allow you to configure alarms, how trends get, data gets logged, recipes, reports, scheduling things based on time or date or a frequency, things of that nature. We also have communications, whether or not you're using the built-in drivers, one of the 240 that we have. I'll do that as part of the demo that I go through here in a minute, as well as optionally OPC clients as well. We've got a lot of different flavors of that, whether it's the traditional OPC DA or a little bit newer, the OPC UA type of information there. So talk about that, and drawing some shapes and some active objects, give you a lot of flexibility there. Then we have some data objects, the alarm event object to be able to view alarms and events, trend, and the grid object. The grid almost looks like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's really meant to grab data from any tabular format. It could be a text file, like a CSV file, it could be a class tag, or it could even be from a database. If we get a little time, I'll show you how to do that. Animations, things like bar graph, position, resize, rotate, can be applied to different objects. We have a symbol library, which I'll touch on and even show you how to create symbols, because that's a real powerful part of the product. We're also an ActiveX or .NET container, and we can bring in what we call linked pictures. So that's a way to bring in a picture like a JPEG or a bitmap based on a file name, and then using string tags, change the file name and change the picture. So real flexible and pretty good there. So again, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, that maybe somebody else decided to use InduSoft Web Studio, and you got handed this as a project, so you might not realize what the product can do. It's a very scalable product, and what I mean by that in several different ways is it can run on many different operating systems. So you might generate a project that was meant to run on, let's say, Windows 7, but then need to deploy it on a Windows CE or even a Windows Server operating system. Well, without much changes, sometimes no changes at all, depending on the project you've created, you can point it to and run it on a Windows CE or run it on an embedded desktop or server edition of Windows with little or no changes, or even now VxWorks or Linux as well, depending on how you've deployed your project. What's really neat is if you're a machine builder or manufacturer, a really good thing is that you could develop it for, let's say, a 15-inch touchscreen and deploy it on a 12-inch or deploy it on a 19-inch, and if it's the same aspect ratio, you just hit the auto scale button and it automatically resizes itself and auto scales the resolution to match the resolution of the PC that you're running on with no changes at all on your part. So that's real handy if you want to offer a standard edition, a high-end edition, or a low-end edition of your machine. You don't have to make any changes at all. It can be very flexible that way. So a lot of the scalability is built in that way. Another scalable item is we've architected the product to think about this. For example, a number of years back when we were asked, hey, we like the InduSoft scripting language, but we want something that's a little bit more well-known and maybe some other resources available, we decided to add VBScript into the product. Why did we add VBScript? Well, unlike some of our competitors who chose some other scripting languages, VBScript will run on Windows CE. It'll run on embedded. It'll run on the desktop version of Windows, and it'll run on the server version of Windows. Unlike some of our competitors, their scripting language will not run on embedded, will not run on CE, and therefore you have to re-architect your project if you want it to run on those different platforms and have maybe lower or higher performance hardware available to you. So some really good understanding and architecting went into this product to be scalable that way. We've also had what we call investment protection, and I can say this because I actually used to be a customer before I was an InduSoft employee, actually deploying real-world projects out in the field. And what this means is that from the very early days of version 1.0, bringing that into a version 8, latest version, and I've actually seen this. We have some customers that I actually did that with back in the late 90s, now bringing it forward into the current versions. It runs 100% without any changes. So unlike some of our competitors that decide to come out with a new product and charge you for it every 3 years and make it not compatible, we can bring your projects going forward. So that's been really nice and really handy. The database interface, if you're not using data to collect and understand what your machine or your process is doing, that's something that you really need to investigate. We can configure very easily to any SQL database, including Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, Sybase, FoxPro, historians like OSI Pi or some of the GE historian. We can even treat Microsoft Access or Excel as a database, although I wouldn't recommend it. If you didn't know this, you know, a lot of people think that Microsoft Access is free and easy. Well, first of all, it's part of Office and it's not free. You do have to pay for it, but Microsoft SQL Server Express is actually free. And unlike Microsoft Access, that will get slower and slower when you add you know, not even a lot of data to it, or just a good amount of data to it. Microsoft SQL Server Express, it doesn't behave that way. So it's a relational database. It's very easy and quick to access. So I'm going to actually demonstrate that as well. But we can write directly to Access or Excel. We're using standard technologies, ODBC, OLADB, ADO, and ADO.NET to get to those databases. So that's one of the reasons why we can get to so many of these different databases. Really neat down here in the bottom right-hand corner, the alarms, the trends, the events, things like our grid object and some of our combo boxes can be fed information from a database to or from a database. And the really neat thing is you don't have to know SQL. When I actually demo the product here in a couple of minutes, I'm going to have a trend worksheet logging data to a database, and I'm not going to do any SQL commands whatsoever. But if you do know SQL and want to get a little bit more advanced, we give you the tools and the opportunity to do that as well. So that's what's really neat. One of the things that's really neat about this product is that you can get easy to use and quick, or very advanced within the same architecture. Also supporting redundancy and store and forward built into the product, and it's quite literally just a checkbox you check, drop down that you configure the other database, and away you go. So if you've got a mission critical application where you don't want to lose any data, then you can set that up in a redundancy or store and forward mode. So this diagram, if we take a look and we think of InduSoft Web Studio at the core of this, or more importantly, our tags database at the core of this, and most of the time, what many of you are going to do is use one of our over 240 drivers to communicate with just about any PLC that you can imagine, or PLC network, and bring data into the tag database and then show it on the screen, and maybe show a trend or a bar graph or a set point or an alarm, things of that nature. That's a very common way to do this. But it's not going to be uncommon for you, and many of you will have this circumstance where maybe over time you've had one brand of PLC network in the plant, and you also have to communicate to another brand. And how do you do that? Well, if your license supports multiple PLCs, like one of our 1500 tag licenses supports 3 PLC networks, so you could communicate to an Omron, a Beckhoff, and an Allen Bradley simultaneously. And then real neat is notice that these arrows are all bidirectional. You could also then share information between those dissimilar PLC brands that might not have been able to talk to each other through the tag database. So read information out of one PLC and then write it to another is something really neat and easy to do. We also support OPC, as I mentioned, as a client. So either OPC DA, OPC UA, OPC.NET, and OPC XML. And those when you use those tags in an OPC client, the OPC client communicating to a third-party OPC server, that OPC does not count against your driver count. So, for example, if you have a license, 1500 tag license that supports 3 drivers, you could communicate to 3 different PLC networks as well as an OPC server in addition, all simultaneously. And again, share information between OPC and drivers, or drivers to OPC. We also support web interfaces. We can also act as an OPC DA server. So if a third-party OPC client wants to come by and pick up information from our tag database, we can act as an OPC server and let their client come in and pick up that information from us. And We can also, as I mentioned before, communicate to databases. And then where appropriate, if we didn't have the tools that you need, we also have toolkits available for sale to be able to communicate to our tag database and or write your own drivers. But if you're going to think you're going to write your own drivers, let us know, because really how we built up our library of drivers is by customers who said, hey, we want to write our own driver, and then in talking to us, maybe we'll do it, and maybe we'll do it for free or for a small charge, and then be able to include it in our standard product. And then that way it gets done by people who really know what they're doing, and gets done quickly and efficiently. And then again, that's how we build up our products with a number of drivers. But if you really want to do that, that's a tool that's available. And then notice again that all the way around this diagram that you can communicate from any of these to any of these. So I'll give you another example, because we've been doing drivers for so long. We've got some legacy serial drivers that are out there for maybe temperature controllers or different drives, motion control systems, things of that nature. Think of maybe a temperature controller on a RS-485 network that you would never have ever imagined being able to get that information into a database. Now you can communicate directly to that device, get the information into InduSoft tags, and now out to a database. So a legacy serial device that you would have never imagined collecting data can now do that. Or taking information maybe from a database, from an SAP system at 2 o'clock in the morning for next production run, and then preloading all the information into the PLCs maybe on the night shift or something like that. That could be done as well. All right. Different ways to deploy InduSoft Web Studio. I did talk about this kind of upper layer here earlier as being web thin clients, secure viewers, and Studio Mobile Access, which is for iPads and tablets and Android devices, things of that nature, kind of platform independent, using an HTML5 compatible web browser is the way that's done. What's really neat for that is some of our competitors have given the capability to do tablets and whatnot, but they make you download an app. We don't make you download an app. We don't have to update the app. You don't have to update the app, and the customers don't have to update the app. It's because it's just a browser. You open up the browser and point it back at the runtime server, whether it's an HMI on a machine or a headless device in a control cabinet somewhere or a server running. You would point that browser back at that running version of InduSoft Web Studio, and then see that on the browser. So it's real nice because you don't have to maintain that app or download that app. Just open up the browser. It can be deployed in a control room environment or as a production monitor. So here we show 6 side-by-side, kind of a video wall. The largest that I've seen have been, personally, have been 8 70-inch monitors side-by-side in a video wall. One of the biggest displays I've ever seen. And we can actually go larger. InduSoft Web Studio will support as small as 240 pixels by 240 pixels, which can be a very small display, or as large as 5 by 9 high-definition monitors. So that'd be 45 high-definition monitors. And you can find the hardware to support that resolution-wise. We support that. And I'll show you a little bit later when I'm going through the website that we've actually got some symbols and some applications, a little video on how to do production monitoring and how to build a very quick, I think I built a production monitoring system from beginning to end in 11 minutes using a symbol library that we provided. So if that's something that you're interested in, take a look at that symbol library offering for the Andon production monitoring. So when we sell the product, we actually name the different license levels. So here on the left, you'll see Advanced Server Plus, local interface, things of that nature. But if you forget about the naming of that for a minute, because that's really not important, the right-hand column is what's really important. The number of tags and the number of simultaneous drivers. So it's very often that somebody will use for kind of a basic HMI, maybe 1,500 tags with 3 simultaneous drivers. And if you notice the color here, this means that starting at 1,500 tags is where you can use the development. And what that allows you to do is develop for runtimes that are at that level or below. So you could buy a 1,500 tag development and a 1,500 tag runtime and develop for that. but you couldn't use the 1500 tag development to deploy on a 4000 tag runtime. You could use it to deploy on a 300 tag runtime or 150 tag runtime. And if you notice this color change here for these, there's no development system available for 300 tag or 150 tag. The minimum development is 1500 tag. The really nice thing is if you purchase one license level and you run out of tags, we don't penalize you. You can just pay the difference and field upgrade that and go up to the next level or skip up a couple of levels, and again, just pay the difference in between there and be able to get yourself going again very quickly. We don't make you send back keys and make them get all registered and everything like that. It's something you can do in the field as well. So hopefully that will help you guys out and alleviate some pain if you've ever run into that. Competitive products as well. So let's see here, advance the slide. All right, so let's open up PC Demo. Now I'm going to be running version 8 of InduSoft Web Studio, and this demo looks a little different than the version 7.1, but you can use either one really. But I wanted to point out that this demo actually exists, because a lot of people will start their InduSoft Web Studio and they will never even notice that this demo exists and skip right on through it and never go back to it. So it's one of the reasons why I like to point it out. Number one, it's a great tool to understand what features are available in the product, and it's not only kind of a sales tool for us, but it's also a good technical resource for you. So if you have never really used the product, you can open up this demo, and I'll show you where it is. You can go Open Project, and in version 7.1, where that typically gets installed is under the Documents folder. Let me skip down to the eyes here. Where that's typically going to be installed is in InduSoft Web Studio version 7.1 Demo. And you'll see under here PC Demo. Now I've added some different versions of it in here, but PC Demo is where that's at. In version 8, where that is down here, we've rebranded the product Wonderware InduSoft Web Studio Demo. And if you open up that PC Demo project or that application, I'll show you that here. So this might look a little new to you if you are using version 7.1, but it's basically the same concept, but an updated look and feel to it. So let me go ahead and run this. And then I'll come back in and show you the development part of this. So this gives you access to the features and some industries and some different ways to use the product. It's kind of really neat to understand how this works and can be used. So let's launch here into the runtime, and some pictures will come up here in the middle, different features. Let me go back and rerun this again here. And you'll see some nice pictures come in here. We'll be able to, there we go. So there's some pictures of some different industries. I can click on features and get at animation, so you can see bar graphs, color changes. I can open up pop-up keypads, and there's you can scale this keypad as well. There's a numeric keypad. There's an alphanumeric keypad. Position, I can make things change, or visibility, I should say. In this case, it's visibility and transparency, where either I'm turning on or off, in this case, a picture. So either the selector switch is pointing to the left, or I hide that and I show a selector switch pointing to the right. Where you can see this little smoke cloud here. I can make that transparent, any level between 0 and 1. So, for example, a 0.5 would be 50% transparent. I can rotate a needle on a meter. In this case, we brought in a picture of a meter, and we're rotating a line to simulate the needle of that, or you can make your own meter as well. Here we're changing the size of this flame or flare, and you can do the height and the width independent of each other, so it can really help you mimic machine operations. Here I'm changing the position by using my mouse, but that value could actually be controlled by a PLC. Or by checking a checkbox, I can control it with my mouse and use it as a slider to be an input for a value. One of the things that we need to talk about is, when you're
developing your HMI for your machine, how do you make it so that the machine stays running as long as it can? And when it's not running, how do you get it going quickly? Well, some of those features can be built in, and I'll show you one on the next screen, but here's an option. Let's say maybe there's a manual or a document for that particular machine, because we all know that the drawings and the documentation for the machine end up in the control panel and they stay there pristine, perfect for the life of the machine. And some of you are laughing because you know better. Why not put a PDF of the documentation on the company server or on a website and be able to click on a link or an icon, and then when appropriate, pull up the right documentation. Now in this case, I'm showing you a version of the Modbus TCP communications driver for two reasons. Number one, to show you that we can open up a PDF. Now this can be done in a separate Adobe Acrobat viewer like here, or it could be done in a web browser embedded into the screen. So either way, lots of different options. The second thing is I wanted to point out that the documentation for the drivers exists. There's a PDF for each driver. And they're pretty much in the same format, same structure. And if we go down here a little bit, and I'll bring this document up when I start talking about PLCs, but it'll show you how to install the driver. It'll show you how to configure it. And it'll mention what memory types and what areas within the PLC can you talk to, how to configure, let's say, for example, the IP address. And then each PLC has its own little unique way of doing things. For example, Modbus TCP, you have to specify the port number and then the PLC ID. For some of the Rockwell PLCs, you might have to specify the type of PLC that it is, things of that nature, where it is on the network. And then we get down into how do you configure the worksheets to communicate. And then probably the best thing that I'd like to point out is down near the end, the troubleshooting section, and how you would read the statuses in these read and write status fields, and then how to use those statuses. Let me scroll down here to that section in the troubleshooting, how to use those statuses or those error codes to figure out why you've lost communication. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But I wanted to point that out as well. We also have active objects that can give you drop downs, radio buttons, check boxes, a list box, message displays, smart message displays, push buttons, things of that nature. Here's that grid object. And then we could even use video. In this case, it's an embedded ActiveX version of Windows Media Player playing a video. This could show live video from a webcam. It could show snapshot from a vision system. So lots of different ways to do that on your project. We have recipes built into the project that will allow you to do changing of many different parameters all at once, one triggering condition. In this case, I've clicked on it, but it could be auto configured from a database or some triggering from a PLC that lets you know what part you're supposed to be running, things of that nature. We can do reports in lots of different formats. I can view reports. In this case, it's going to be a rich text format. Let's see. Say this. In this case, I'm opening up Word to be able to show a logo with different colored fonts, things of that nature. And while that opens up, let's see. Let Word respond here. So here you can see a report example. Colored fonts, there would be a logo here, things of that nature. And you know what, I didn't save the report, so that's why that's not coming up here. But could be from a text file. So if I save this report and then open this up in just Notepad, you can see this could be just text. Well, because the report format can be just text, I could do this as a CSV or a comma-separated variable, and then open that up in my laptop. I happen to have CSV associated with Excel. So Excel is opening up off screen here. Let me pull that back into view as that loads in. And so that could be in Excel as well. And get those values in there. Let me close this. Or even an HTML format. So I'm going to save this report as HTML. Now this is going to open up a very basic view of an HTML report. We've got some more examples up on our website, or we've done other reporting webinars as well. So you can have tables. I actually had a customer that wanted to print an invoice, and so we did an HTML report that looked like their invoice, put all their customer information, ship to, bill to, and printed that out and turned it into a PDF and allowed them to print it out, which was kind of neat. So real kind of advanced reporting as well. And if the reporting tools within InduSoft Web Studio is not enough, we have an agreement with Ocean Data Systems that allow you to use their Dream reports or purchase their Dream reports as well. And we could tie into any third-party reporting tools as well. Trending, pretty nice feature within the product. Let me show you this. This is kind of neat. So this trend object is really pretty powerful, and I'm just going to scratch the surface here. So while this trend is logging here, I'm going to pause it. It's still logging in the background. And let's say I wanted to compare this point down here to this point on this sine wave. Well, I can click on the chart and get a vertical cursor. Hopefully this is coming through on the WebEx well enough that you can see this line here. And so I can compare the value for this cursor here with this table down here, or this legend, and get the values of where that crosses those points. Well, let's say that I wanted to do this a little bit more detailed, and I wanted to not have these middle two pens. I can click on these checkboxes here and hide those middle two pens, and now I get just the pens that I want. And maybe let's now stack these axes that are on separate axes. Let's now merge these and put these on the same axes. So now you can see where those points cross. Notice that one of these, they're transparent. You might miss a value if it wasn't transparent, if it showed up like this square wave does behind this other one. And now I can click and say, okay, I want to see where does this point cross right here. And I can get those values. Now, if I want to zoom in a little bit, I can use these zoom tools here and say, okay, I want this to be the starting point and this to be the ending point, and it'll zoom in. And now I can say, okay, where is that point? And so it gives me a little bit more granularity. We can cancel that zoom. We can unmerge the axes. We can unhide those middle points, and we can start this thing running again, and it'll go back in. Now, this duration here is the amount of time. In this case, I'm showing 1 minute from the right-hand edge to the left-hand edge. Very typically, we're going to have the right-hand edges now, and then add this duration. In this case, it's 1 minute, so this left-hand edge was 1 minute ago. In addition to a time-based trend, we can do an XY plot. We can turn this, rotate this 90 degrees. So there's a lot of different features built into this trend application. There was a question about, can I repeat the production monitoring capability? Not sure what the question is there, but if it revolved around my andon production monitoring statement, I'm going to show you that towards the end when I get into the different resources. So please let me know if I don't cover that by the end. Alarming. Now this alarm object, the way that this works is it can see all the alarms present in the system at any time. And you get to choose the filtering of this. So I could see, in this case, let me force some simulation alarms here, and I'll go into alarm, out of alarm. This has now got, because I've clicked on these two digital points, you can see the digital 1 and digital 2. I slid the slider up into the high alarm area, and the low alarm has gone out of alarm condition. It is not yet acknowledged, but when I slid it out of this low alarm, it's gone into this this different color. And if I double click on it, and in this case we happen to have it set up as forcing a comment, you don't have to have that. But let's just say I'm testing. I can click on OK. That will get logged to the database, and then notice that alarm goes away. If one of those conditions is present and I double click on it and acknowledge it, I'll put in a little message here, that alarm changes different color. It shows this icon as a checkbox and say it's been acknowledged. And if I then switch to the history format, you can see that those comments are saved, and the time and date stamp when those happened, all are logged as well. I can now filter on this. And this is where kind of the power comes in with this object. I can say, okay, I want to see the alarms from this group but not that group, and say okay, and notice that there's no alarms in that second group, but if I put the first group back on, which is the alarm summary here, or the simulation, then I can get those alarms back. And I can filter that. Notice that I'm doing this during runtime. I can filter things like the tag name. I can filter things like the message, the user that was logged in, the time stamp, whether it was a high alarm or high alarm priority, or you can even have a selection that gives you a configurable field to do that in. So real flexible object to be able to do that. In this case, I'm doing this during runtime, but you could also do this during design time, where you'd actually get another additional field that allow you to put a string in there and change the filtering however you want to. So it's really kind of neat and very, very flexible alarming that we have. Multi-touch, I don't happen to have a multi-touch on this laptop, but you can move objects around, pinch and zoom, pan and zoom, scroll, things of that nature, and it'll work with the grid, the alarm object, and you can slide things like this up and down. Now, that works with my mouse, but again, since I don't have a touchscreen on this computer, I can't really demonstrate that. But it's just with a single checkbox for most of this stuff. Some industries here give you some really good ideas of how to make things move, how to log, how to do some, take in this case like a 3D CAD image and put motors and switches and bar graphs over that and make that look really nice. Some different applications. Notice that the trend here is stripped down to its kind of bare minimum and just being able to show. Nice little trend there. Water treatment, oil and gas. Here's where the trend has been rotated 90 degrees. Got some of our symbols built in here. Let's go on to a couple of these different solutions. Built into here we have packaging, PackML solution. Overall equipment effectiveness, which has been pretty big in different machine production industries, where you can see this. If my machine is running, it's supposed to be running for 8 hours, and it's only running for 6, what's it doing in those other 2 hours? And grab that low-hanging fruit to be able to troubleshoot your machine and get higher production, higher quality without adding in any additional resources. And the question that came up about production monitoring, here's one thing that can be done. This can be shown on a large monitor showing the overall equipment effectiveness, or you could show any information from a production standpoint. Again, I'll show you that in the symbols when we get to that in a minute. And then talking a little bit about the corporate, and some text will come out. Actually, this will jump to our website, talk a little bit about InduSoft, and be able to jump right to our website here. But I also wanted to point out that in this demo, you can actually click on this icon. It'll be able to launch the WebThing client, or in this case, we'll be able to translate or put it into different languages. So I could go into Portuguese, let's say here, or Spanish. And we can even get the non-Roman character sets here. So if you've got other languages in other countries, it's not just the Roman character sets. It'll give you Italian, French, Spanish, German, and English. Some different things to do there. So feel free to go ahead and grab from this application and understand what we're doing. If you say, oh, I want to know how they're doing that, and take a look at that particular screen, we'll open that up, take a look at that, and see how we're grabbing that information or using that, and feel free to use that in your own application as well. All right, so that's pretty much the PC demo part of this application. And let's see, before I do anything else here, I'm going to just close my email in the background. And what I'm going to do, first of all, let me go back to my PowerPoint here, because I wanted to show you, let's see, PC demo, demonstrates most features, uses technical reference. And now I'm actually going to get into demonstrating the actual product. So what that will be is I'm going to build a screen, put some shapes and animation, show you how to do a bar graph and a slider, how to change screens, color, text display, talk about tags, and we'll eventually get into drivers, so on and so forth. And so let's go back here. What we'll do is I'm going to create a brand new project from scratch. Now, hopefully this is why a lot of you have joined us today, and how to get going and what's all going on here. So I could create a brand new project either from this, what's called the quick access bar. And just to let you know, you can customize this quick access toolbar. One of the things that I've been doing lately is a lot of high definition, big screen monitor type stuff. And I'll often replace a couple of these icons by going into this more commands section and removing, let's say, for example, remove this save all, and then I want to go into the view menu, and I want this fit to window. Since I'm doing large screen applications, I'm going to add this and then move this up in here. And then when I add a screen, I can now click on that fit to window, and it will do that. So you can customize that menu if you want to. But to start a new project, I can either click on this icon for new or grab this file button and click on new here. It's same thing either way. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to start a project. Now this license level here depends on what license level you have on your license, and in my case, it go up to the 10 million tags. But many of you will see either local interface or operator workstation or workstation plus. So then you have to give it a name. But before I do that, let me talk a little bit more about this. Sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked as a question that came in. Question again was, how do I design a production monitoring system? I'll show you that at the end when I'm talking about the symbol libraries on the website. I'll actually show you that. So here is all the different license levels that I have on my particular license key. And this drop-down filters those different license levels. Either I can see all of them, or I can see just the Windows versions that will run on desktop or server, or I can see just the embedded that will run on Windows CE or embedded, or I can see all of those license types. So in this case, I'm going to choose all here and choose my local interface, which is my 1,500 tags with 3 drivers. And then because I already have that project, it's warning me. So what I'm going to do is actually change this. We'll call this Jumpstart. And I'll use today's date, which is 2015, October 6th. And then we'll start that. Notice what it's done here is it's made a folder with my project name, and then it's made a .app file also with that same project name. That's because it can keep everything contained within that project folder, and then I have everything in there. That's all I need to do to back that up or archive that, which is really nice and handy. Then you get the choice of what resolution to choose. Now, this drop-down, years ago, we kept trying to keep up with the display manufacturers. This may be 640 by 480, 800 by 600, 1024 by 768. Those were all common displays. And the display manufacturers kept coming out with new resolutions and different formats. Finally, we just said, you know what, we can't keep up with everything that they're doing. Let's make it custom so you can just type in the height and the width. Now, my laptop happens to be a high def, which is 1920 by 1080, but you're going to want to choose where you're going to deploy this, what the typical not only resolution, but aspect ratio. So for example, if you're using a 1024 by 768 or 800 by 600, it might be a small 7-inch monitor or something. That resolution or that aspect ratio is a 4 by 3 aspect ratio. If you're going to use a high def monitor or widescreen that's 1920 by 1080, and you're going to use that, you might want to make sure that you have that same aspect ratio because that'll make it auto scale a little bit easier. So I'm going to use 1920 by, you know what, actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to choose 1024 by 768. So we're going to demonstrate a couple of points with this. When I run this project, you'll see where this fits and how this works. So I've created this application as 1024 by 768. And while this is loading up, it used to be many years ago that it wasn't so uncommon to have an HMI application go from full screen, edge to edge of the entire screen, and every time you change screens, you replace the whole screen. Well, a real neat thing about InduSoft Web Studio is that when you, I'm going to right-click here. So notice that this is the Project Explorer, and I have the Global tab, the Graphics tab, Tasks, and Communications. Here in the Graphics tab, and I'll explain these in a second, if I right-click on Screens and click on Insert, what I started talking about is it wasn't so uncommon to have full screen and replace the screen every time. Here you can choose the height and the width of the screen and then the location that it appears, and we can make a multi-screen or screen group and have that appear and either replace and overwrite what was on there or make it a pop-up, a dialog, and maybe have it automatically close the screen behind it, lots of different things there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by creating a screen that's full screen, and I'll switch into this other concept that I was talking about, show you how to do that. I'm not going to change anything on here. Click on OK. So this is going to be 1024 by 768. Maybe I'll put a title up at the top. This will be the main screen. And just to show you how simple this is, I'm going to make a bar graph with a slider. Well, we don't have a bar graph object, but we do have a rectangle and then a bar graph animation. So what I'm going to do is put a rectangle here, kind of in a vertical orientation. Double click on the properties of this and show you that I can have a border, I can have the background be filled or unfilled, change its color, or even put a text caption on that, change the font. But in this case, I'm going to leave it as a rectangle, and while that's selected, I'm not going to close my properties box. I'm going to choose the bar graph animation. Now notice that this part of the ribbon is under the graphics tab. And again, while that object is selected, I'm going to choose the bar graph animation. What that's done is it's taken that rectangle that I had selected and applied the bar graph animation to that. Notice how this is indented here. If I then applied multiple animations, for example, a color animation, a visibility position, and a resize, notice it's still just that rectangle with those several different animations applied to it. Once you get this concept, a lot of what we're going to do is very easy after this. So also, if you didn't mean to do that, you don't have to delete that object to get rid of those. These are kind of like toggles or like check boxes. I can just click on these to turn them off and just be left with just my bar graph animation. Now what I'm going to do is I could put a tag, I could import my tags. I could copy and paste them from Excel. I could import them from different PLC save files. There's a lot of different ways we could do that. I could manually type in my tags into the tag database over here on the global tab. Again, I could copy and paste that. I could just manually type those in. Or back here on the screen, I could type in a new tag, let's say temperature. And if it doesn't exist in the system, it will prompt me and say, hey, that doesn't exist. Do you want to create this tag? Well, a little bit of talk about tags. Tag names have to start with a letter. They can't start with anything but a letter. And then they could be up to 255 characters. And those characters after the first character could be numbers, letters, or an underscore. Again, 255 characters. It's not case sensitive. So temperature with an uppercase T or all uppercase temperature or all lowercase, that's all the same tag name. It's not case sensitive. In this case, I'm going to create this tag. I have the choice of making it an array, which we're not going to talk about yet, or we could make it a Boolean, an integer, a real, or a string. Now, Boolean is just a bit on or off. An integer is a signed 32-bit number, so plus or minus 2.14 billion. A real is a signed 64-bit number. I don't even know how large that is. It's a big number, but that's where you get fractional parts. And then a string is up to 1,023 or 1,024 characters, right around there. If you go over that, you can turn this into an array and then get much larger text or start reading from a text file. So for the temperature, I'm just going to leave this as an integer. Click on OK. So now this is going to go from 0 to 100. It's going to draw on this kind of dark blue color in a vertical upward orientation. Now, I don't have a way to change that temperature tag yet, so let's go back to our graphics tab, grab it from the symbol library here. Let me show you some of the symbols that we have. For example, we have some nice push buttons, nice pilot lights, switches, tanks, meters, valves, things of that nature. I'm going to grab a slider. I know slider 1, just from me using this, it goes from 0 to 100%, which I know this bar graph does. I'm going to double click on this and put the tag name. I don't want to type that again, so I'm just going to double click here and grab the value temperature, click on OK. That way I didn't have to type it again. And now that's all I really have to do, in fact, I don't even have to save this screen. It'll allow me to run this without saving that the first time, just to do a quick test. But don't forget to save it. Always good to save. Let's see. And so now I should be able to slide this up and down. So hopefully that was something quick that might answer a few questions for you. Notice that this is, again, I'm running on a high definition monitor, a 1920 by 1080, and this is where my 1024 by 768 screen comes in. Notice all this extra space. That's because it's actually being shown at 1024 by 768 on my 1920 by 1080. Let's go change this for a second. First of all, let's save this screen, and I'm going to save this as main. And if you've ever gotten, if you've ever run your application, let's say that I stop this project and I run my project here, I'm going to get just a blank gray screen. Why did that happen? Well, that happened because I don't have it defined as being my startup screen. I could, and the right place to do this here is under Project, Viewer, and then I can choose my startup screen from the list of screens that I have. In this case, I only have the main screen. But alternatively, and probably a little bit easier, is to expand my screen list here and then right-click and then say Set as Startup. That's a nice little convenient shortcut instead of doing Viewer and then clicking on this and grabbing that screen name, so it's a little bit easier. Now, when I first had that screen come up, it was, in fact, let me do this, show you again. When I run this, it's only 1024 by 768 on this whole big 1920 by 1080. And if I come in here to the viewer and click on auto screen scaling, what that'll do is essentially grab that lower right hand corner of that window and stretch it until it either runs into the bottom or runs into the side, keeping the same aspect ratio. So now if I run that, what you'll see is it's gotten as large as it can. It's now run into the bottom of my screen. You still have the gray bar on the right-hand side. That's because it's kept that same 4:3 aspect ratio, even though I have a 16:9 aspect ratio or widescreen on my laptop. That's so that squares don't become rectangles and circles become ovals, or American footballs or rugby balls, depending on what part of the world you're from. So that's one way that you can keep that screen, keep that aspect ratio. So again, why it's important to know the aspect ratio of where you're going to run the project at. So let me go turn that off before I forget, because that will help us decide some things later on. So the next thing that I wanted to show, let's go back to my PowerPoint because I did the bar and the slider. Let's get that bar graph changing colors and show you how easy it is to change colors. So that bar graph by default was just a kind of a dark blue. Let's go back into the graphics tab, and while I still have that selected, let's add the color animation to this. And what we'll do is we'll set that limit expression here to that same tag. I'm just going to click on this little browse button, that same temperature tag, and then say, okay, when it's between 0 and 33, it'll be green, and let's choose a custom color. Add this, and I'll choose green. And then when it's from 33 to 66, we'll make it yellow. And then from 66 and above, we'll make it red. And we can do lots of different variations. On this screen, you get, this properties box, you get 4. If you need more than that, we can go up to 16 here. And if you need more than that, I can show you how to do 16 million colors, depending on what you want. So it's pretty flexible. All right, so based on temperature, when it's these different levels, it changes different colors, and that will supersede the color that's in the bar graph as well. If it doesn't fit in any of those circumstances, it'll change to that default color. So let's go ahead and run this. And notice here that's between 0 and 33, changed to yellow, then to red. We had a question come in: if you develop your project in specific resolution and you need to migrate it to a smaller one, is it possible? Yeah. The auto screen will also go smaller as well, but if you want to kind of hard code or really change the resolution of what you're doing, there is a feature here in the Home tab to be able to convert the resolution from this resolution to this resolution. You have to be careful. I really recommend backing up your application because you can really stretch objects and kind of destroy your application if you're not careful. So I learned something early in my career, which was there's two kinds of people when it comes to backing up your project: those who do it on a regular basis and those who will. Meaning that if you don't back up, you're going to find a circumstance where you've lost a lot of stuff. So hopefully that answers your question on how to convert the resolution. But even if you go to a smaller resolution and it's the same aspect ratio, I recommend using this auto screen scaling. If it's the same aspect ratio, it will go smaller as well. Hopefully that answers that question. All right, so hopefully you got that color change idea here. We have, as part of the training videos that we have on our website, and I'll show you how to find those, we can show you how to do stacked color bar graphs where the color that was there, let's say maybe the green, the yellow, stay there and stack on top of each other. We'll show you how to do that in the training class. Let's see, what's the next thing that I wanted to show? Text. And I want to start talking about scripting and some of these curly bracket ideas. So let's say that we wanted to put, what I did here earlier was I put just a text object on the screen. That was using this text object, and I just typed. You could use a rectangle, and often it's preferable to use a rectangle. And I'll show you why in a minute, because in addition to just static text, and I could type in here in this caption, this is text, which I could then change fonts on, which you can do on the text object as well. But this gives me some nice auto alignment and some formatting and wrapping of text. Instead of just being a single line of text, I could pick, let's say, a larger font here, and then maybe I want that rectangle, maybe I don't want that rectangle. Another thing that's really kind of nice to do is just some very simple formatting. What I might do is take this rectangle, instead of making the border a solid, I might make this a sunken rectangle, change the fill color to this kind of medium gray, and then put another rectangle, which I will then push to the back, which I'm going to right click and send to the back behind the other rectangle, and then change its color to that same medium gray, but now make this a raised rectangle. And then with some resizing here, I can get some nice kind of 3D beveled text in there that just with a couple of little rectangles gives you some nice looking formatting. Now, in addition to this rectangle or just static text, I can also make text in here dynamic, and let me show you how to do that. I'm going to take that tag that I just made and embed it right in this object. Maybe instead of saying this is text, say this is the temperature in degrees C or F or whatever the case may be. And then also inside of that, on its own line, doesn't have to be on its own line, I'm going to put in curly brackets, I'm going to put that tag name. And now, when I run this project, let me format this up a little bit. When I run this screen, you can see the actual value in there. So notice that now I can embed tag value in there. I could also use the built-in scripting language if I put it inside of curly brackets. So let's take this concept another level farther. Let's do a button on here. And for those of you, okay, so sidestep for a second. I'll get back to this button in a minute. I'm doing a lot of changing of screens by using the Alt and Tab on my keyboard. If I hold down the Alt key, I can hit the Tab key and then switch between applications that are running on my PC. If I happen to have my project running, how can I get out of it? I don't have an exit key. I can either hit Alt-Tab, or a standard Windows function is hit Alt and F4, and that will stop the current focus application that'll stop that. Well, here's what just happened. I stopped the viewer from running. I did not stop my runtime from running. What does that mean? Notice that my runtime still looks like it's running. If I open up the help system here, I have a pretty good help system, and I highly recommend using it. If we go to internal structure and data flow in the introduction and scroll down, there's a nice little diagram here. So what is happening is I have that temperature tag in my tags database, and I also have a TCP/IP server running here, and then I have the viewer. Now the viewer is kind of like the canvas that my screens paint on. And when my viewer was just visible and I hit Alt F4, it stopped my viewer from running, but what's still happening is my TCP/IP server and my tags or my background tasks are still running. And you can see here that even though I stopped my project, if I look at my, I still have my background tasks and my TCP/IP server are still running. And to stop those, I could stop my project by doing this. But what reminded me of that is since I was adding a button, we also have a symbol library that are buttons, and one of the buttons is exit. And this exit not only stops the viewer, but it shuts down the application as well. You can make your own exit button. And again, recommend watching our symbols training video if you want to see how to do that, or taking our class in Austin, Texas. But this will allow you to stop the application, not only the viewer, but stop the application from running, and it'll prompt you on how to do that. So notice that it's stopped there. So hopefully that was something that taught you a little bit of something. So now back to the button. So let's say that we had a button on the screen, and I could change the text on that button. We're going to call this toggle mode, okay? And now we're going to make a tag called mode. Well, if I want to change that or toggle that, I could put this command animation, apply that to this button, or as a shortcut, we also have that kind of same button right here on the properties of that. We just made that as a convenient feature. But I'm going to apply this command animation here. And again, you can see what this has done. Like the rectangle had those animations. We have the button with the command animation on it. And so we'll switch to that command animation. By default, the type defaults to VB script, but there's lots of different things that I can do on the press of this button or on down. I can either use built-in scripting language, VB script. I can open a screen, close a screen. I can turn on a tag, turn off a tag, or what I wanted to do here, which was toggle a tag. And I don't have the mode tag set up yet, but we're going to make this a Boolean tag that will be on when it's in auto mode and off when it's in manual mode. And that's just a definition that I just made up, and you can define your own. Since I don't have a mode tag yet, it'll prompt me, say yes. And I'm going to make that a Boolean type tag. And maybe to show the status of this, we'll put a light next to this. And I could grab a light out of our symbol library, but I'll show you how we can make one just out of a circle. And we don't have a circle object, we have an ellipse. And similarly, we don't have a square, we have a rectangle. But let's say I wanted to make this a perfect circle. What are some options? I can go in here to Format, and let's say I knew I wanted that to be exactly 100 pixels by 100 pixels. I could go change my height and width. Or a little bit easier maybe is I can come in here to this Format, click on Resize, and it'll make both the heights and the width the same size. That's a little bit easier way to do that as well. So now that I have that circle, very similar to how we did the bar graph, we're going to put a color animation on this, and we're going to make this change based on that tag mode. Notice I'm not typing here. And when it's off, it'll be red. When it's on, it'll be green. And I'm not going to have any blinking going on there. So we'll save this screen and run. So now when I click on this, it shows green. When I click on it again, it shows red. If you didn't know this, and this is kind of important, about 10% of men are colorblind. So it's a good idea not to show status with only color changes, because about 10% of your operators aren't going to be able to see it anyway. So how do we get around this? Well, what we could do is right on this circle, what I'll do is I'll put a rectangle, very similar to how I did this, but instead of showing the color of the rectangle, I'll remove its border and I'll make it have no background, and I'll just put a caption in here, and I'll put inside of the curly brackets, I'll put the mode tag. And now when we run this, in fact, let me increase the font there a little bit. Let's bump this up. And I could get fancy and select both of those objects and hit align center, align middle, and now I have that perfectly centered. And now when I run this, if it's off, it's 0. If it's on, it's a 1. Well, that's not very humanly readable, so let's go and modify that just a little bit. I might need to change this font or make this a little bit wider here, but what I'll do is I mentioned before that not only can you put tags inside of curly brackets, but you can also put some of the built-in InduSoft scripting language. So here I'm going to use if, and I won't open up the help, but the format for this is parenthesis, and then the condition, comma, so it's if this condition, then else. So I'm going to say if this condition is true, then show the word auto, else show the word manual or off. Again, I might have to change the font. And then all of that's enclosed in parentheses. And to make this a little bit more readable, it could say if mode equals 1, show auto, otherwise show manual. The equals 1 isn't necessary. It's a little bit redundant, but it's a little bit more humanly readable. So I'm not sure if I have enough space for the word manual. I might have to adjust that. In fact, let me just assume that it's not going to make it in there and just set the font down a little smaller. Might have to come back and adjust that again anyway. So there's auto, and yep, I missed it probably by a few pixels here. So let's change that font down to a 12-point font and see if that fits. So there's manual and there's auto. So make a nice, easy to read screen and also cover any potential colorblind. Again, 10% of men are colorblind, so it's good ways to see that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about alignment. So let me do this because a lot of people aren't clear as to what's going on here. So let me show you a couple of tips. I'm going to draw a square or a rectangle. I'm going to draw a triangle out of a closed polygon. And I'm going to change its properties and fill this. And then I'll draw a circle or an ellipse. All right, so now if I select the square, and I'm going to hold down my shift key, the triangle and the circle, and then I go to format, align, and align left. I know I can't hear you guys, but what do you think will happen if I click on align left? In most of the classes, people will speak up and say everything will align to the left edge of the square. Well, that's not the case. When I click left, watch what happens. Everything aligned to the left edge of the circle. Why did that happen? Let me click on my keyboard, hit Control-Z, and undo this. What happened was the last object that I selected was the ellipse, so that's the reference point. So for example, if I choose the ellipse, and then I hold down my shift key, choose the square, and then choose the triangle, notice that this one has the darker handles on it. That's the reference point. And then if I do align to the left, they'll align to the triangle. See that? So that's some good information on how that works. Also, some layering techniques. Every object on the screen has its own layer, and that can be denoted here by this ID. In this case, this last ellipse that I drew is object 11, so there's 12 objects on the screen. It starts at 0. This text should be ID 1. Did I draw something else? Was it the rectangle? No, maybe it starts at 1. No, it should start at 0. So let's find out. Let's take this, unless we change something in version 8 that I don't know about. This object is ID 11. If I go to Format and send it to the back of all other objects, it has become ID 0, and now you'll see it's behind all other objects on the screen. And if I push this one layer, which I could also do right-click and say bring forward by 1, I can still see that it's behind almost every other object except for that first rectangle. Oh, that's because I pushed that to the back. So you can see the way that this layering works. This layering can also control your tab order as you're entering data, but you can do that as a separate way. I can right-click on white space on the screen and set tab order, and if I've got input fields, this is the order that the tab key will navigate you around to those different input fields. So I can, again, right-click on that and turn that off. That's another nice feature that we have. Another feature, so for example, if I've got this circled now is behind most of the objects on the screen, let me make this circle a little bit smaller. Let's say we've been drawing some pretty fancy stuff here, and now it's behind this square. So before I get doing this, notice that it's object ID number 1. If I've moved this behind, if I want to double click on that and configure it, I can't really get to it without moving this object out of the way, configuring that object, and then moving this one back. But there is a way to do this. Since I know that's object ID 1, what I can do here is go to Graphics, Selection, Go to, and then object ID number 1. And now that object is selected. Notice it's behind there. I still can't double click on it. But if you notice that when you right click on an object to get to its properties, you can double click on it or click on this line by right clicking, or you can hit the Alt Enter key combination. So again, if I go through this and say go to object 1, and then I hit Alt and Enter on my keyboard, it's brought up the configuration for that ellipse. And let's say I change that to red. I've done that behind that object, and so there's some ways that you can edit when things are layered. And maybe if you have a real complex object that you've drawn, do that. Somebody typed into the comments or the questions align to the left. I don't know if I mistakenly said align to the right or something like that, but if you have a question, if you could elaborate more, appreciate it. Maybe answer your question there. So another neat feature within the product is, let's say you've got some buttons and maybe your HMI, or maybe you're changing pages, and your industrial PC maybe has 10 function keys below the screen. Notice that I'm copying this button without hitting Control C and Control V. I could copy this with Control C and paste with Control V. When I do that, what it does is it pastes it up here, and then I have to move it. Well, what I could do is select the object, hold the Control key down, and drag, and now that's made a copy of that, including all the formatting. Now notice that I've left different spacing between here, and I've done that on purpose. What you could do is window around all those objects. That'll select all of those, and I can then right-click and let's see, it's not on this right-click. It's actually on Format, Align, and I can distribute evenly horizontally, and that'll put an even amount of space between those buttons, so that maybe I can line those up with the touch, the real keys on the front of my HMI or industrial PC. So that's another thing that you can do there. That works real well when you're trying to create a scale for a bar graph or something as well. All right, let's see. So I've got the mode there. Let me jump back to my presentation. So I've changed color, changed text display. I haven't done data entry yet. So let's talk about entering values. So here I was using a slider to change the value of this temperature. And before I just put a static piece of text using this text object. There's some other things that you can do with a text object. Let me show you. I'm going to build 4 different objects, or 4 different ways to enter this, progressively getting easier and easier. So if I put this text object on the screen, and let's say I wanted temperature, this temperature piece of text that I just put on the screen is just a static piece of text. Notice that I can't get at this text data link animation. If I put another piece of text on the screen next to this and put pound signs in there, Now notice that I can get at the text data link animation. The pound signs are a little special, or hash marks, depending on where you're at in the world. That allows us to have a tag that we could put in a value here, in this case, temperature. Now when I run this, this is the hardest of the 4 ways that I'm showing you. This is probably not the way that you would do it. So you can see I can enter that or change that value and it shows up there. A little bit easier way would be if I put a text object, say temperature, U-R-E, and then a space. Notice again up here in the upper right, I can't do the text data link until I put the pound signs maybe right in that same text object. So here the caption is actually temperature space pound signs. And then I can put the text data link on it. This is a little bit convenient. Again, a convenient way rather than doing it here. I could put the tag temperature in here. In fact, I don't want to type that, so let's just go browse this, double click on temperature, put that right in there. And now maybe I want to input enable this so I could type the temperature in there. So I'm going to say run this, and it should show that same value. Not only will it receive the value from the slider, because it's coming from that tag, but it'll also allow me to enter that value as well. And I could put min and max limits on it if I wanted to. That's kind of a second way to do this. A third way to do this, which is even a little bit easier, is take that same idea, temperature, and instead of typing the pound signs, what I can do is go into the properties here and hit this text data link. That's, again, similar to this, but instead of just applying the text data link animation, watch what it does to that object. It puts in, let me go back to the text object. It put in the colon, a space, and 4 pound signs for me, and then it left me at the tag expression field. That's all I have to do is put in that tag, and it's done that for me. So I didn't have to do all that. So again, progressively a little bit easier on how you do that. All right, so that's some data entry there. And let's see, what else did I want to show? Change screens. So I've got a screen going on here. This is one screen, and I want to go to a second screen. What I will normally do is add a button somewhere on the screen, and depending on how you do that, I will often make a navigation menu, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But to set this up to go to a second screen, what I will do is maybe put the name of the screen, we'll call it screen 2, and I will have this change to a screen or open a screen, and I'll put the name of the screen in here. Well, I don't have that screen yet. I could manually type the name of that screen, but what I would prefer to do is be able to pull that from a list, and here I only have the main screen. Since I don't have screen 2 yet created, what I'm going to do is wait, and I will create that screen and maybe put some text on the screen, screen 2, and then save this as screen 2. And then tie this button to screen 2 by picking it from this list, and that'll prevent misspellings and typos and things of that nature. And then let me copy this button, and back on screen 2, let me then paste this button and give myself a way to get back to the main screen. So here I will again pick that from that list, go to the main screen, and then change the label on the button to main, and give myself a way to do that. This is not optimal because now I've got to put a menu on every single screen, but I just wanted to show you the basics of how to do this. Now when I run this, it should open up to my main screen. I should be able to go to screen 2, which I am, and should be able to go back to the main screen. This type of button is probably the most simple way to change screens. Now what it's doing, if I open up a screen here and I right-click on the screen background and say Screen Attributes, what this is this is a Replace Partial type screen. And if we look in the Help System and we go to Creating Screens and Graphics,
And working with screens. Where's this at here? Oh, I'm not going to find it easy, I don't think, here. Screen attributes dialog. And we look at the screen types. I miss it here? Yeah. Replace partial. This opens up a screen and closes all other screens that are replace type screen, either replace partial or replace complete, that it partially covers. So you don't have to close the other screen. And I'm going to show you some things about this. So when I have the main screen open, because it's a replace partial type, and when it opens and partially or completely covers screen 2, it closes the main screen. And I'll show you down here in this output window, I can right-click and click on Settings and see my display open and close, or my screen open and close. And if I delete this text and I run this, what I should be able to show you is that the main screen has opened, and I'm going to open screen 2. If you notice that button, when we defined it, it only opened that screen. So what it did was it not only opened screen 2, but it closed the main screen as well. It did that housekeeping for us. But what I wanted to point out is that the key point is that it partially covers this. I'm going to come back to this concept in a second. Rather than making a full screen application, what I might do, and let me pull some of these objects in here, is instead of making this screen full width, what I would probably do in a real application is, instead of make this 1024 wide, I might shave off 100 pixels of this and make it 924 pixels wide, and then move it over 100 pixels. And notice it trimmed off the edge of it here. And I'll do the same thing with my screen 2, is I'll go in and I'll chop off 100 pixels. And again, watch the right edge of this here. When I click on OK, I also need to do this, is it'll pull that edge in by 100 pixels. Now I want to make a screen that I can navigate with, and so I'm going to create a screen that's only 100 pixels wide, but it's the same height, and it's going to start in that upper left-hand corner. And then what I can do is, I don't need these buttons now on these separate screens. I can put them on here, and what I'll do is I will make that button a little bit skinnier here. And go back to my screen 2. Cut that from there. Go back to my navigation screen. Paste this on here. And I would format these up so they were the same size and make these look nice. And then save this as navigation. So now I have navigation, a main screen, and a screen 2. Well, how do I get multiple of these screens to open up simultaneously? That's what this idea of screen group is. So here on the Graphics tab, I'm going to insert a screen group, and I'm going to name this Startup. This name doesn't make it Startup. That's just the name of it, but it makes it a little bit more humanly readable. And I'm going to choose the navigation and the main screen to be this Startup group. And then I'm going to go back, again, I could go back into my project viewer and make the screen group Startup, the Startup, or here under screen group, I can expand this and right click and say set as Startup. So now when I run this, notice that I get my menu along the side, and I don't have to recreate that every time. And because I haven't overlapped those, they don't accidentally close the other screen. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's, I could put that exit button on there as well. Let's say that I have accidentally misfigured the number of pixels that I need. And let's say that I make this navigation, instead of being 100 pixels, I make it one more pixel wide, so it's 101. And if you remember that definition, if I still have that help up here, let's go to Screens and Graphics, working with screen attributes.
just to make sure you understand where I'm going here. The replace partial, if it partially covers a screen, even by 1 pixel, it will close the other screen. So I've now made this screen 1 pixel, and it's going to overlap the other screen. Watch what happens. Go click, and it has opened the other screen. We can see that in our output window here, that it opened up the other screen, but it really closed it immediately. And now when this one overlapped on that one, it closed that one. So if you've got some funny things happening, double check to make sure you're not overlapping screens size-wise, even by a pixel. So that's one thing that could be causing you some problems there. Hopefully that solves somebody some issues. All right, I'm going to turn that feature off here for now. And so that was changing screens. And the next thing that I want to show is, let's talk about tag types and properties. I talked about the Boolean, integer, real, and string. Let's talk about tag properties. Let's go back into our help system here. I think I actually still have that open. And talk about tags and tag properties and a list of the tag properties. Now, a tag like temperature has a value associated with it, but it also has all of these properties associated with it, such as the size of the array, if it's an array, the name of the tag, the quality. Timestamp is a real neat one, the time and date that it last changed. The units, if you're using Celsius or Fahrenheit, the min, the max, down to the individual bit level. I'll show you how to use that. And lots of different things, including the alarm limits. This is something kind of unique to InduSoft Web Studio, that the alarm limits are not separate tags. They're actually properties of that tag. And notice that they're read-writable, so I can change the limits, the set points for those alarms based on properties of those. Let me show you how this works. I'll come back to the alarm limits in a second. I want to show you how this timestamp thing works. So here in the database spy, I can actually show and look at any tag. So here I'll use temperature. And my current value is 44. If I go back to my runtime, if I had a screen to go back to, let me stop that and restart that, because I think I changed that size. So let's go back here, rerun this. You'll see that it's at 44. If I go back into my database spy and I use the syntax to be able to get to these properties, which is a minus greater than with the property name after it. So for example, temperature, let's type this in here, minus greater than timestamp. Let's get some extra characters in there. Minus greater than timestamp, and I hit enter. You'll see that first of all, I'm on the Eastern time zone in the United States, and right now it's 2:44 and 17 seconds. The last time I changed the value of that tag was 12 minutes ago. And if I go change the value of that tag, let's say I enter 123 in here, this will update to the current time down to the millisecond was the last time that tag changed. So that's kind of neat to understand. Sometimes that's very relevant and why you need to know that. Now let's go turn on some alarms in the system, and I'll show you how to do that. One of the easiest ways is to, here under the tasks, you can go in and configure an alarm worksheet. So I could take the tag temperature, and again, I don't want to type that again, and something to catch. And for all of those that haven't used InduSoft very long, this is maybe something that has been causing you some frustration. If I want to pull up that object viewer and I'm already selected on a cell and I double click on it, notice that it's placed my cursor on there. But I wanted that object viewer to come up. Well, you have to click off of the cell, and then instead of selecting the cell first, you double click it while it's not selected. So if I double click, then it will pull up in the object finder. If you're already selected, it takes that double click as you want to edit that. So hopefully that answered some good questions for you. Why does that do that? Sometimes I can get it, sometimes I can't. So here, if I set the temperature and I set up the high limit as 90, let's say, and maybe say that this message is too hot, then that would come out on that alarm summary, that alarm object. And maybe I take temperature. Again, I don't want to type it, so let's double click here and say maybe the low limit is 10, and this is too cold. Now we'll save this alarm worksheet, and let me show you a few different ways to get at those properties. One way is here on the Home tab, here under the Tags group, I can use that object finder, open up temperature, and then look at the properties of that. And then here go into alarms, and I can see that I've set up a high and a low, 90 and 10, too hot and too cold. That's those properties of that tag. In addition to that, I can use this same syntax here and say temperature minus greater than high limit. That's the name of that property, and it'll show me that that value is 90. I could change this, and let's say that I notice it's rewritable. I could say, okay, I want to make this 95 and change that limit during runtime. And now if I was to go back into my alarm worksheets, I would see that that's changed from 90 to 95. It's also changed up here from 90 to 95, and that's because it changed that property in the tags database. And what that changes, let me go back into the development environment here. Let's go on screen 2, and here on screen 2, I'll put that alarm object. And what I'll do is go back on the main screen and just copy this and paste this and give us a way to change that temperature. So when it's below 10 and above 90, it will alarm. So let's close the screens and run it. Go to my screen 2. I'm already too high because I'm above that 90. When I get below 90, it'll normalize and change that other color, which I could acknowledge and have that go away. And when I get below 10, it can change to that. So was it 90? Is that where I left it? No, left it at 95. Another thing that you can do is actually, by using some of the ideas that we talked about earlier, I could change that set point using this text. I could say, okay, I want to make the high limit and put some pound signs in here. And then instead of tying this to the tag temperature, I'm going to tie this to the tag property, temperature minus greater than high limit, input enabled, and I might want to set my, depending on how I need to, my minimum and maximum at 0 and 100. And now the alarms will follow that min and max. So here when I go, right now it's set at 95, and when I cross that 95 threshold, it'll go to too hot. If I put it back down in kind of a lower range, let me acknowledge both of these alarms to get those off the screen. And now let's say I want this to be at 75. I've got a new limit. Why didn't that take? I know why, because I didn't stop, because this is a pretty major change to my tag database. So I need to stop my project and then rerun it to get those properties to take effect. So now I want to change this to 75. But it's not letting me. Why not? Somebody called me out on what I did wrong, if you noticed. Let's see here. I have minimum. Because I put the minimum value there. I switched these two around. So this should be minimum value 0, maximum value 100. So a little bit of troubleshooting there and see how I figured that out. So let's stop that and run that again. And now I should be able to set a limit of 75 as the limit. And now when I cross that 75 threshold, let's go up here really slow, 69, 75, then I get that alarm at the 75 limit. So some people have asked me, a lot of people have asked me, how do I change those alarm limits? And they're really happy to find out that it doesn't take any extra tags, that it's all just part of the properties of that tag. So it's this list here, high limit, high limit. So some really neat ways to do alarms. And find out a little bit more about the properties of tags. So let's talk a little bit about drivers. I already mentioned the manuals. So
drivers here, communications drivers. I'm going to add a new driver in, but before I do that, I want to go back into the help system and show you kind of what we've been doing already, which is here under internal structure and data flow. I want to show you that chart again. We created a tag called temperature, and we were able through TCP/IP server, which opens up in the background, be able to view that on a couple of different screens. We were then able to change the slider, which wrote back to the tag database and then updated that. And then in this case, we were using the database SPY to either write it or read the value. Now what I'm going to do is add a driver in here. Notice that all the tags are basically internal tags. There's no concept of, is it a communications tag, is it an internal tag, an external tag? Some HMI systems have this two different concepts of the way tags are. In this case, our tags are just internal, and it just all depends on where it gets its information from, and it could come from any of these sources. Well, I'm going to add a driver runtime in here and be able to talk to a PLC or a simulator, update the tag, which will update the database SPY, which will then update the viewer as well. So let's go ahead and add that in. I am going to add the driver for Modbus TCP in here because I happen to have a simulator on my computer. But if you remember when I opened up that PDF, which was our help system, I could scroll down here and choose the Modbus TCP driver. I could choose the help, and it'll open up that same PDF that I had in that PC demo application. So this will let me know is this really the right driver and how do I configure it. In fact, I'm going to keep that open because I'm going to need that in a minute. But I'm going to select this and add this driver to my project. So if you have, for example, a 1500 tag, 3 driver license, you could add up to your 3 drivers in this section. So I could add, let's say, Allen Bradley TCP for, or let's say the Allen Bradley Ethernet IP driver, Modbus TCP, and a Siemens driver in here. That would be your 3. And again, it's not the number of PLCs, but it's the number of networks that you have. So here I'm going to have the Modbus TCP protocol, say OK. And now what that's given me is this main driver sheet. Now this main driver sheet allows me to put a tag name in here. In this case, I'm going to double click on that, put that temperature tag in here. And now I need to tie this to the station inside that PLC, or that I/O point inside that PLC. In this case, I'm just going to use a simulator that's on my laptop, and I'm just going to use my local loopback IP address, which is 127.0.0.1. For those of you who don't know, that's an IP address that basically says talk to yourself. It's going to go out the Ethernet port, come back in, and transmit and receive and listen to yourself. And I'm going to go back into this Modbus TCP configuration manual here and look at how do I need to configure that address. So it's the IP address, the port number. For most Modbus TCP applications, it's 502, and then the node number, the ID number of the PLC. So it's, notice here that it's not another dot, it's a colon. So it's the IP address :502:1. So here I'm going to put :502:1, and then the I/O address in the PLC. Most Modbus PLCs start at, for a holding register, it's memory location 40,001 or 400,001 or 4,001. They're all the same in the way that I just said that. It's memory type 4 and then offset 1. So what we do is we're going to put in a 4x:1 because that's memory type 4 offset 1. So that'll be the first holding register. Now that will communicate, should communicate just on its own there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, I happen to have a Modbus simulator. Now this is a third-party simulator. We don't write this, we don't maintain it, we don't support it. But the idea, what I just said, is this 40,001 address is right here. So this is 40,001 offset 0. What I put in my system was 40,000 offset 1. So but that's that first address right there. If I make this always on top,
and have this running over here, and I run my project. Right now that's at 10, and every couple of seconds it changes. There's 11. I'm not clicking on anything. I'm not changing anything. You can see that it's changing over here. And let's say that I change the PLC simulator to have a value of, let's say, 55. When I hit enter, you'll see that that goes to 55. And then likewise, if I scale this value here, change that down, you can see the value on the PLC going down as well. Now, we have a nice feature. If I go into the project viewer and see this show question marks when quality is not good, if I close my simulator, let me get my runtime back up here. If I close my simulator, effectively cutting the cable or blocking communications, what you'll see is it'll retry in the background for a second or so, and then it goes to question marks. That's so we don't show an invalid value. We show question marks to let the operator know that's not a real good value and it's got bad quality, so don't show the wrong value. That could lead to some dangerous situations. There are some industries that might want to show the last value as opposed to no value at all. That might be a reason why you do that, so you don't check that checkbox. So that's why that works that way. So let's talk a little bit more about drivers. The main driver sheet, basically you can put different memory types in here and different tags, all different memory types, and this will figure it out and optimize it. Whereas, and this will scan at a default rate of 600 milliseconds, which is changeable. But if you need something different than 600 milliseconds, what I would recommend is inserting a new sheet that's a little bit different than the main driver sheet. So here we have the main driver sheet. Here we have our first standard driver sheet. Now in the main driver sheet, you have these statuses up here, which I highly recommend. That gives you your error codes. Normally, most drivers are going to be a 0 if the error code, if the read status is good, and then it'll change to some value non-zero. Could be negative as well if the communications is bad. I highly recommend that you monitor that and take a look at our driver training manual, training video to be able to see how to do that. In this standard driver sheet, not only do you have those 4 statuses, but now you have the ability to trigger when this reads, when this writes, or if it reads in the background or writes whenever you change a tag. So you get to highly configure and highly choose when this reads and writes. Now, a lot of people think, well, why wouldn't I just want this to read as fast as it can all the time? Depending on what your industry is, for example, if you're at a pumping station that's out in the middle of nowhere being run by a battery, you don't want this thing transmitting maybe even through a satellite connection that's a high dollar per megabyte. Maybe you want this thing to wake up in the middle of the night, transmit its data at 2 a.m., verify that the data got to the other end, and then shut down communications. So a scan time of 24 hours isn't unheard of in that type of application. Some people might want, millisecond update rates. Some people want 24-hour update rates, or once per week, or once per month even, depending on the application. So this way it lets you have all the power and control over it that you want, and you would set up that time base somewhere else. Now, notice that these are triggers. The way that this works is not only on a false to true transition, but it's whenever that tag changed. So for example, if you wanted to use the built-in system tag, and here we have 46 different tags that are the hour, minute, second, yesterday, and things of that nature. For example, the second, if we look at hour, minute, and second, the seconds tag, or SECOND, that tag changes once per second, and that's tied to the seconds clock in your computer. If you were to put that tag in this field here, SECOND, that would force this worksheet to update once per second. Or if you put in minute, that would force that to update once per minute. Let's say that we wanted to make our own time base, and we called this RD trigger. Well, I don't have that tag, so let's create that tag. Let's. Do I want to make it a Boolean? No, we'll make it an integer. And then what I can do is I can go over here to my Tasks tab,
And in the scheduler, now I highly recommend that you watch the training video on the scheduler because I'm going to go through this kind of quick. There's 3 different types of events: calendar, clock, and change. If we use clock, we don't use the triggering field, but we use the time field. And the format of this is hours, minutes, and seconds dot essentially milliseconds. So let's say that we wanted this every 100. 100 is a little fast. Let's say 500 milliseconds. I can just use 0.5. I don't use the date field, and I want to take that tag, and since I didn't remember what I typed, I'll go look here, read trigger, ID trigger, and now every 500 milliseconds, maybe what I want to do is say not or invert the RD trigger. So I invert it and then write it back to itself. And once I save this scheduler and I run my project, I should be able to go take a look at that read trigger and see that update. Maybe it's updating too fast. Let's slow that down just so get at that. So I'll put up my scheduler and say instead of every 500 milliseconds, let's make this just every 1 second so we can see that concept in there. It might be just too fast for that display to update. And then again, too, I might not have stopped my application and reran it. But you'll get the concept anyway. And so now every 1 second, that's changing. And I could do that down to the 0.1 or 100 millisecond level if I wanted to create my own time base that I would then use in my standard driver sheet. You can have one main driver sheet, basically put everything in there, and it optimizes it for you. For each standard driver sheet, notice that the station field isn't down here anymore. It's up here, and notice that the header, the memory type, isn't down here as well. It's one memory type per sheet, so you can have multiple of these sheets. Again, I highly recommend that you take a look at your driver training video or attend one of our classes. All right, let's go. So that's the basic of drivers. Oh, also one of the things I wanted to mention, here in the station field, in the standard driver sheet, or even here, you could make this a string type tag and then put in curly brackets that string type tag. Let's say we called it station and made that a string type tag. And then I could define that station tag as being the IP address and then change that on the fly, and it would change which PLC it wrote to. That's a nice way to do things there. All right, let's add a trend and get it talking to the database. And then we'll talk a little bit about symbols and some other things, and we'll get things wrapped up here. All right, so let's go to the, let's go back to screen 2, and we'll move this alarm up here a little bit. And I've got this slider changing my value for temperature. So what I'm going to do is put a trend object on the screen, and we'll make this a little bit larger here. And let's see, I don't have any questions coming in. Hopefully everybody's keeping up with me and watching things here. Let's size this a little bit. And now I'm going to tie this trend to the tag called temperature. And maybe this is degree, what do I put on the other screen? Degree C. And you don't have to put a scale in here, but it helps figure it out. It will auto scale. Let's change the style of this. Let's make it a little bit thicker line. Since this is temperature, let's make it red. And let's make it a solid color and also make it that same red, but it's going to be a fill transparency of 50%. And when I click on OK, we'll see what that looks like. So that looks like that. And then by default, this object is not a logging object. It's a view-only object. And we'll change its data source if we need to, but I don't have anything logging at the moment. So what I want to show you, let me close down all these different worksheets here. So we'll not save that. We'll save screen 2. And let me go back and change this to
27.0.0.1:502:1, because that's going to talk to that PLC simulator. We'll be getting an actual value from there. I'm going to stop my project because I've made some fairly significant database changes here, or tag database changes, and I'm still getting question marks because I don't have that simulator running. Let's launch that simulator in the background. And so now I've reestablished communication. This thing will start counting up. And if I go to screen 2, what you should see is that value is counting up with that tag, or I can also force it to change here. And so now what's happening is I'm viewing this trend, but it's a real-time trend only. It's not logging. If I change and go back to the main screen and come back, it's lost all of its information and had to start over. So what we could do is, let's go back into the development environment, and if I went into the Tasks tab here under Trends and inserted, if I put in the tag temperature here, this will now, once per second, based on that seconds tag, when it triggers, and again, it's not just a false to true transition, it's whenever that tag changes, it will trigger this to save into a proprietary file format on the hard drive. And now I'm not going to show you that file format because I think a lot of people will want to see this logging to a database, so I'll do that. But what I will show you is that when this logs to the hard drive, now it's logging, and if I probably need to stop my project again because I'm kind of making changes to the database there. If I go to my screen, now that data is going to be logging to the hard drive on my computer, and if I change screens and come back, it should pull back out of that file and have retained that information. In a similar way, what we're going to do now is log to the database. Now, I don't have a database created, but I'm going to open up my Microsoft SQL Server Express Management Studio, and we will align everything and set up this database. I'll create a brand new database here. Now this is the Microsoft SQL Server Management tool, and notice here that I'm connecting to my PC, but the engine is called SQL Express, and I'm using Windows Authentication. I'm going to connect to that engine using this management tool, and again, keep in mind that that was SQL Express with my PC name in front of it. Now, because I've done a few of these Jumpstart webinars, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new database, but with today's date. So I'm going to make this new database Jumpstart. This comes up here. I'll start typing. So I will make that Jumpstart, and today's date, which is 2015, October 6th. When I click on OK, what that usually does is adds to the bottom of this list today's the new database that I created. And what I wanted to show you is expand into this, and there's just system tables in here. There's no other tables in here yet. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to stop my project. I'm going to have all the other windows closed, and now I'm going to go under Project Options and set up my default database. Now this will be the connection that it uses throughout my project by default. I can add others if I want to. There's lots of different ways to do this. And I have to provide a way to connect to that database. So I'm going to hit this Browse button to build this connection string. We have kind of this wizard-like interface that will build this for me. I can connect to this provider here, which is the Microsoft Jet, which is how you connect to most Office products. Or I can use the Access database engine, or I can connect to Oracle. In this case, I'm going to use the SQL Server OLADB provider. And when I click on Next, it's essentially walking me through these tabs. So watch when I click on Next, it goes here. Now this server name, if you remember when I pointed that out, it had my PC name with SQL Express. Well, since I want this maybe to be portable, instead of using my PC name, what I might do is type in local, and that will use the local PC, or I can use the IP address as well, and then SQL Express here. And that'll go right to that engine. And I mentioned that I was using Windows Security, and now I can test the connection to that engine. Thumbs up, going good there. Now I can choose which database inside of that engine I want to communicate with. In this case, I'll choose that new one that I just created, a Jumpstart. Was that 15.10.06? Where did that show up here. Here we go. So there's the 15.10.06, and I'll test that connection again just to make sure. So now I've built that connection string. I could put in a tag here and then put this connection string maybe in the startup script to define that string tag, and then that way it'd be a little bit more flexible as well. So that's all I need here. And now if I go into that trend tab task where I was logging to the hard drive, now change this to database, and here under the database configuration, I'll show you, I'm not going to change anything. That's a default connection that I just set up, and it's automatically going to create trend001, which is based on this worksheet name here, and it's going to automatically use that. Again, I didn't make any changes. It's going to automatically log into that database once per second. Something I didn't point out, so this save on trigger uses this field, and that this save on tag change, if any tag in this worksheet, and this will expand as you type in more and more tags, if any tag changes, it will save the entire worksheet. You can have one or both of these checked. You can do both of them or either one of them, so it doesn't matter, but I just want to explain that as well. So let's go ahead, and now this is logging to the database. I'll save this, make sure my project is stopped. I'll run this. We'll go to screen 2, and right now, because my PLC is automatically, my simulator is automatically counting up, I started at a value which was off screen. I'll go to 58, 59, I'll scroll down a little bit more, 14, should auto increment to 15. Let's go back and stop my project. I don't have to, but a little bit more convenient. I'll go back into my database, and let's see, where was that? I will refresh my tables here. Now you can see trend001, and I will right click and edit the top 200 rows, and you should see, if we pull from that database, that table, all those values that I just logged from that trend worksheet. So that's how easy it is without any SQL, knowing any SQL. Although if you knew SQL, you can use some of our built-in commands and write your own SQL script and queries and things of that nature. So it's just that easy and just that powerful to be able to do. All right, what else? So before I move on, let's stop that. And I wanted to show you this concept of get app path, and I showed you if, and I showed rectangles. Everything up until now has been running in this same folder, and I'm not running there anymore. I'm running down here in my project called Jumpstart 10006, and so everything is inside of this folder. But if I was to deploy this and move this to another PC and put this in a different folder, I might lose some of the references if I hard-coded my file path in anything. What I wanted to show you is there's a built-in scripting command. Actually, there's a lot of built-in scripting commands, but I'll point this out to you. Here in the appendix, you can see all these different functions that we can get at. And I'm going to choose one that's called get app path. Now the script is get app path, and you have to give it the option for some parameters. So I put open and close parentheses on there. That's how it can discern that from a tag. And then what it's done is it's given me return the string that's my whole path all the way to my project, including the last backslash. So for example, if I was to use this, go back to my screen here, and put a linked picture in here and give it a picture, what I could do is not only give it the picture path here, but I could also, in that field, put this get app path and then the file name for that, or maybe even put a string name for that picture, and it would find it no matter where I moved this project. Wherever it was running, it would be able to find it. It makes it a little bit more portable that way. That's a nice handy feature to have and understand that there's a lot of those types of things built in. All right, so we've got about 15 more minutes, and I'm going to try to show you symbols and maybe even touch on thin clients before we wrap up. So this slider is a symbol, and I wanted to show you that, for example, if I take this rectangle and open up the properties, and I've showed you a few different properties boxes, they all look kind of similar to this. But when I have a symbol, the properties get a little bit different. And what's happening here? I have this 2-column sheet where in a symbol, either that we've shipped with the product or that you've built on your own, what's happened here is we built these 2 columns, this property and this value column, and defined these custom properties. Now, symbols have kind of 3 different ways that you can use them. You can use them strictly as graphics and bring in pictures, and that keeps everything looking similar. Or you can use this concept of these custom properties where you set up your own properties, which I'll show you how to do. Or the third idea is having the symbols being what's called linked. And when you add a symbol into your project from the symbol library, what it does is it puts it into your project symbols and puts it right into the folder inside of your project folder. And then those designs of these symbols, in this case I just made a copy of this. Notice it didn't make a copy here. They're both referencing that slider 1. And if I was to change the design of this slider 1, they would both update, or anywhere I've used those throughout my entire project would update. So let's go make I think I have some space on my main screen left to do this. Let's go make our own slider here and show you how to do this. What I haven't done is use the position animation. Let me just take a rectangle here and apply a position animation on here. I could move this vertically or horizontally based on a tag, and then allow the tag name to change value and determine how many pixels I'm going to change. In fact, let's do that. Let's take this based on temperature, and if the value changes from 0 to 100, I want to change 0 to 200 pixels. So this will move 200 pixels based on this temperature tag changing. So it's a read-only object at this point. I can't drag it around, but I can change the value of the tag. Now, notice that when I move this value, when I increase the tag of temperature, or increase the value of the temperature tag, that object moves down. Notice that I'm clicking on it and holding, I can't drag it. Why does that move down? Well, the reason it moved down is because I set it up to move 200 pixels. And we start in this upper left-hand corner as 0, 0. We increase X to the right, and we increase Y downward. So if I wanted this to move upward, I could say move it minus 200 pixels. And now if I run this, save this, and run. Now if I move my tag, notice that it goes upward, or negative 200 pixels. So that might be the direction that I want. Now I can very simply change that into a slider by adding this gesture to enable this as a slider, just by checking that checkbox. That's made it an input. And now when I accidentally clicked on tasks, which I didn't want to do here. I want to stop this and run this. This will show me this. Now I can slide this slider, but this is now also a slider, and I can change its value here. So let's go make a symbol using this animation concept. What I want to do is use a rounded rectangle, and I like the 3D beveled look of this button, so we'll start with this button here, but I don't want that text on there, so I'll just delete the caption. So now I have that 3D beveled button, and I'll do the same thing that I did here. I'll apply that position animation. Notice that it's still a button with that position animation. We'll tie it to a new tag. Now I don't know the name that I want to use, and if I go into the help system here and I look under oh boy, where's it at? Under screens and graphics, libraries, symbol library. Here's talking about the symbol library, but here's making your own symbols. And I'm going to scroll down here because there is a special syntax that we want to use. I'm going to skip over the thing called category first. It's a £, the property, and then the value. And if you remember when we looked at the slider, it had 2 columns. It had a property and a value. Well, that's where that comes from, that property and that value, and it's separated by a colon. So it's £, property, colon, value. So what we're going to do is use that syntax, and we're going to say, okay, this tag name that this is going to move up and down on is # tag name. That's the property. I want to make this really obvious. So instead of saying tag name, I'm going to say insert tag here, and then a colon, and then I'm not going to use a default value. I'm going to leave that blank. For the value range, I'm going to use $min : 0. So that'll set up that other property, and then $max : 100. Maybe we'll make this 500. So it's going to be, I'm going to have 3 custom properties. Insert tag here with no value, minimum or min with a value of 0, max with a value of 100. Those will be my custom properties. And then I need to, what I almost always forget, is make sure that this is set up as a slider. And I need to make sure that down here, if you look on the status bar, my X position, my Y position is 591. And if I want this to slide up to about here, let's see, that's, so I can get about 200 pixels in there, no problem. I might have to make this just a touch larger. So then I want this to go negative 200 pixels. That'll give me enough room to go almost all the way to the top. Then what I do is I select all of these. I right-click and say Create Linked Symbol. Now this then lets me save this in my project. I'm going to put this in my folder, and I'm going to call this My Symbol, or My Slider. And so now what should work is when I double-click on this, instead of seeing the properties for these objects, you should see similar properties like we did on there. There's my insert tag here, my min and max. And if I put in a tag, let's say the temperature tag here, now I should be able to control that temperature with my own brand new slider. And notice it goes 0 to 500, which is past the maximum of the other bar graph, but you get the idea. And now let's say that I copied this, and instead of tied this to temperature, I made this a tag for pressure, which doesn't exist yet, but maybe make that an integer. But I just want to show this is tied to yet another tag. And when I run this, they are independent of each other. So here's temperature, this is pressure, even though I'm not showing that on the screen. I also wanted to show that these are tied back to the design that I made called My Slider. And if I want to edit that design, maybe I want to put a display up at the top and maybe change the color. I can right-click on either of these because these are both referencing that same design, and then edit the linked symbol. And this opens up an editor that's a symbol editor, not the screen editor. And maybe I'll put a rectangle up here. This is something I did really early on. And inside the caption, inside of curly brackets, I'll put that, because I type something different every time I do this. Let me make sure that I grab this same syntax, and I'll copy that, and I'll put it inside of the curly brackets here. And I could do some formatting commands. It's going to have a bunch of extra decimal places behind it, but you get the point. And then maybe I wanted to change this from this medium blue maybe to a green here. And when I save this, it says you have to save this on all your screens to be able to take effect. But notice that it changed the other one as well. I changed the design, and all of them are referencing that design. And if I now run this, you should see that. I guess I'm not seeing decimal because I have an integer value, not a floating or a real value there. But notice that I get that value, and that's kind of how we do this here. So that's how you build symbols. So let's take this concept to the next step, which would be how to display this maybe on a tablet. Now I will admit that I have had some problems with WebEx actually forcing my screens to not show. But we'll give this a try here. You'll get the concept or the steps anyway. So I've made that screen, let's say that main screen. Now what I can do is go here to Thin Clients, and before I go into the mobile access, what I need to do is I need to publish my screens as HTML. And let's see, it warns me that if I want to improve security, how to do that. So it's saving all of my screens as HTML.
And once I get that done, should be here just fairly quick. So it's going to tell me that there's some objects that aren't supported in the mobile access. That's okay for this demo. We'll understand that. I want to double click here on mobile access. And I think it's double click. Maybe it's right click and insert. It takes a second or so for that to open up. And one of the things I can do is I can put a tag name in here and show this as a widget. So for example, I can put in the temperature here and maybe say this is degrees C, make it writable, and show a circular gauge as a widget. Now alternatively, I can also come down here, and since I published my screens, I can make the main screen available. I can maybe put a label on here as test, make that screen available. And I can save this. And okay, again, a little security warning there. I'll stop my project and rerun my project. And now I have this screen running. I should be able to open up, for example, an HTML5 compatible browser. In this case, I'm going to use Chrome. And I'm going to point it to myself here. And when Chrome opens up, which I don't have that on my off screen here. While I'm waiting for this, there was a question that came in about ActiveX. And since Internet Explorer is being replaced in Windows 10 by a new browser, and ActiveX is eventually going to go away, we're going to have a lot of different ways to replace the WebThin client. And Internet Explorer isn't going away yet. It's going to live on for a little while here. So that's not gone completely. So we've still got some ways to do that. But we're coming out with some new tools within our mobile access to be able to support all the different ways that you ever do in WebThin client. So look for some new things coming here. Also, all right, so back here in the Chrome browser, if I point back to myself, so 127.0.0/MA for mobile access, what this should do is then, because I think I'm running, maybe not running Microsoft IIS in the background. Let's take a look at that here. So let's IIS, make sure that I'm running Microsoft IIS in the background. What this has done is put in some extensions into Microsoft IIS, and I should be here on my default website. I should see these extensions here. Now I need to make sure that my let's restart this. And if this doesn't work, I know that WebEx has actually caused me some grief before. If you take a look at our videos, I'll show you all of this stuff working here. But if I rerun my application, and I'm not going to try to troubleshoot this because it could be something else as well. And I'm running out of time, but I'll have this. I'll open up my browser, and I'll try this. And we'll see if this works. No, it's not finding the server, but at this point, it would normally show you that web page as well. So I'm going to skip over trying to troubleshoot this in favor of showing you some of the resources that we have. So if we take a look at our website here, you can get to online live chat with our support group. In addition to that, you can go to our forums, and we've got a lot of good customers that help other customers here. So you can get to the forums and type in your question, and there's a good chance that other people or maybe one of our employees would actually help you answer your question. There's also things like here under products and downloads, what I would recommend is that you go to drivers and take a look to make sure you have the latest version of any particular driver. So for example, you can click on, let me pick one that might be, so you click on this little magnifying glass, and it'll tell you the version number, the file number. Of course, I picked one that doesn't have a version, but let's go down to Allen Bradley here. ABCIP, that'll have a version on it. And so there we go. The current version is 11.5, so you should take a look at that make sure you have the latest version of the driver. And the drivers are independent of the InduSoft Web Studio version, so you can always add the latest version of the driver into a later version of, or an earlier version of InduSoft Web Studio. We have a whole bunch of sample applications, communications examples also, but these are free applications. Feel free to download these if you're having questions on how to do alarms, how to do trending, recipes. There's a lot of really good examples in here. These help out a lot of people. There's a couple hundred of these, I think, in here. Also, take a look at our corporate blog. There's not only advertising in here. We don't try to do a lot of commercial stuff, but there is, for example, using XML in InduSoft, new symbols, how to upgrade your license. A lot of good information in here, as well as here under support, you'll find a video library, which is this type of webinar, and the webinars that we do every couple of weeks. You'll find literally hundreds of recordings either in here or on YouTube, as we've done these on different topics. Real good resource if you're looking for a particular topic. Or here under training is the training videos, and our entire 5-day training class is online as videos, and I've referenced these a few different times. I highly recommend pulling from these. Now, also here in the store is free add-ons, and for the question that has come up a couple of different times about the production monitoring, here's where we've added some free symbols that we've added on before version 8, and now they're built. Most of these are built into version 8.0. But what I did was production monitoring. If you take a look at this andon symbol set, andon is another term for production monitoring that put big screens in the sky, or typically LED boards. I've done this with some giant, like 70-inch monitors. So I've created this symbol set that allow you to get production monitoring in here. But there's also, you can download this for free, but in addition, I made this video on how to use these symbols, and it says here 15 minutes, but actually in 11 minutes from scratch created a production monitoring system from beginning to end using those symbols, and just how easy it is. So hopefully that will give you some ideas. One of the things that I didn't mention, I'd like to, is on the, I mentioned on the PC demo, we have some of the production monitoring and OEE type screens. So let's go back to my PowerPoint and make sure that I covered the help file, the website, training, tech notes. We also have the chat, the forum, sample application, symbol of the week. We also have consulting services available. So we have our own kind of system integration group available, and the minimum time that you can purchase is a couple of hours. You just need a little bit of help to get over a hump. You can purchase, then you don't want to go through our support, maybe purchase a couple hours of consulting services. Something else that we do is we do full turnkey projects out of that group as well. Or you could do like a startup kit, which would maybe help me establish the foundation of my project, get all the screens laid out, get the right formatting, get everything set up just so I get headed in the right direction, and maybe do that in like 5 days or a week of time and get you going in the right direction. So let's see, any questions? I think I've answered all the other questions as they've come in. So if you have any other questions, basically about 4 minutes over what I plan to do. But I really hope that this got you over the hump, get you, again, a jump start, and get you learning and how to just really get started with doing projects quickly and easily. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free to chime in and let me know. Put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel, because I can't hear you on this type of webinar. So I'll wait for a second when you're talking about that, or put in questions. But again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining, and some good comments coming in. Thank you. You're welcome. Again, really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can contact our tech support if you're having troubles. If you need a webinar or a proof of concept to determine whether or not you want to purchase InduSoft Web Studio, we'd love to do something for you and help you out and get you going. And we want to make it easy for you. We appreciate your business. We appreciate your time. And I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. And thank you. We really appreciate you joining us today, and I hope this got you jump-started and get you going quickly. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and join us on one of our other webinars.